I was a Marine. I defended our embassy in Iraq.
I was in the Army. I was a combat photographer in Somalia.
We did a lot of good over there.
I saw a fellow soldier save the life of a child.
That's why I'm still serving.
And that's why I'm still serving.
These are the stories of true American heroes, of men and women who served in the U.S. Armed Forces, veterans now, still serving their fellow Americans.
I think the day before I went into combat, I wrote my mother a letter saying that it was almost like a farewell letter. There was a patrol the night before, and they had captured one of our GIs, and they stripped his body upside down and pinned him upside down against the hill. And so our guys decided to form a patrol to go and rescue the body, which we obviously knew was going to be some sort of a trap or an ambush or something. This patrol was led by a Lieutenant Henry A. Schenck, whom I really didn't know. But you got to remember, at that particular time in the Army, the whites didn't fraternize with the blacks, etc. And so I didn't really know him, but he was someone whom you knew that you had to respect. And so when he formed a patrol, I, like the rest of the guys, the 12 or 15 guys, volunteered to go to rescue this young boy who was pinned on the side of the hill. Lieutenant Schenck was perhaps the bravest man that I'd ever known in my life or will ever know in life. When we walked into the patrol, into the ambush, he just fired and fired and fired. He sought no cover, and he was out there in the open, just shouting, cursing, and everything like that, and shooting. And rather than, trying to, he was doing that to draw fire to himself. But you have to take note of a guy like this, and trying to tell him to take cover, but you don't do it so freely because of the fact he's an officer, and you don't tell an officer what to do. The officer tells you what to do. But it was just that there was something that happened. That was that pivotal moment when I knew that this guy was as heroic as anyone that I'd ever met in life or ever will meet in life. And so it just became riveted in my mind that I would try to do something for him, and particularly after he was killed. I was knocked out. I was KO'd. An explosion came our way, and then I woke up in the stream, and I was so severely wounded I didn't think that I was going to live, and my gut was ripped open here, and I had a fragment in the side here, and then my leg was messed up. It was just a total wreck. But I woke up and it was just, the reverberations of the sound of gunpowder, and all you can do is taste the gunpowder. Well, you taste it because your stomach is ruptured in the shot. And then my hand later became almost glued to the skin, and I was doing that because I was holding my intestines in. I think I'm not necessarily the right person to talk about acting because my career has been, I've been very, very fortunate, but it was a career that I never really wanted, I never actively pursued. But I had come later on in life to realize that it was important. I had my show called Tenafly. What I never did when I was on the air was to place that much importance to it, and I should have. And so that was one of my major mistakes in life.
But you're missing the point, man. It takes shoe leather, sweat, hunches, it takes all of that.
Hunches, come on, will you? How many hunches does it take to put a man behind bars?
More than you think. Look, I was a cop once, and I know.
Dr. Shell, Lieutenant Brock.
I'll play the American pimp. I will play Jim Crow, but not the Roscoe.
Your wife's killer wanted us to think he broke into the house, but we think he was inside all along.
Inside?
inside Mr. Westbrook. In fact, we think he's still here. And we think we'll be able to prove it.
My next big project, which I'm extraordinarily proud of, is the thing called The Purple Heart. Based on the episode that occurred when I was wounded and my patrol leader, Henry A. Shank, was killed. He was listed as missing in action, and I knew that he was killed in action. I always felt that I should have, I spent 62 years trying to find his family, to tell his family what a heroic man he was. And so I think that that story should be put on film. The real story behind the episode was that this blonde-haired boy whom I met, I suppose it was minutes later, who challenged me as I was crawling out of the creek. He was almost, and it's the God's honest truth, he was almost saintly. How he was able to carry me from point A to point B, which we eventually found our way back to our lines, how he was able to do that up to this day, I don't know. There was a stream that we had to cross. He didn't drop me. I thought that he was going to leave me there to die. And one of the things he says as he's walking away from me, I say to him, I never got your name. And he says, I never got yours either. Let's just say that we were brothers under the skin. But you got to remember, at that particular time in the Army, it had just become integrated, and so we didn't really, the whites didn't fraternize with the blacks, etc. So which is always, I've held that view whenever I've dealt with somebody. It just shows you how our country has progressed. It shows you that people are concerned about what you're doing as an individual, what you're doing to further this sense of brotherhood and the sense of community that we're supposed to have. And so I just thought it was very important in that direction, because particularly when the Patriot of the Year award was awarded to some very noted people in the past, and to be noted among senators and astronauts, and to give it to some guy who happened to have been in a war, I just thought it was a very, very wonderful and deeply, deeply appreciated thing to do. One of the things I think we have to do in this country is we have to start changing our priorities. We've taken the mundane, we've taken things that are really not essential, not that important, and elevated them to the level of almost where we just deify a reasonably good rock and roll singer or something, not rock and roll necessarily, but some artist or some movie star or something like that. Like last night, we attended something which I thought was something very, very important, and I sat there thinking about, we had this gathering of, thanks to Gary Sinise, where they were honoring amputees, the Wounded Warrior program put on by the USO. And I was thinking that they invited some Hollywood stars to be there, and it's wonderful that they showed up. My old friend Ted Dancing and Rob Lowe and people like that. The soldiers stopped to pay attention to those guys when it should be the other way around. It should be the celebrity that's looking and honoring and embracing the amputee or the veteran or something. We have our priorities misplaced, you know. We deify a celebrity, and yet and still we damn near ignore the veteran, and that's wrong, and it's going to be costly. My argument or my concern is that the American people really have no knowledge of some of the things that are occurring with the VA and what civilians and stars and celebrities can be doing to help them. When I was an ambassador, I tried to initiate a program called a boots on the ground type of thing, wherein celebrities can come by as the troops are being dispatched to the war zone, to have them to have a cup of coffee or a cocktail or something like that. And you know, the soldiers can ask them, how does it feel to work with a John Wayne, or how does it feel to, what does Sidney Poitier really like, or something like that. And you take a couple of guys just sitting around and forgive the term, but just chatting or BSing, so to speak, about the industry. Let them know that they're a part of this thing called America as well. Like Truman said, about the Medal of Honor. Truman said, "I'd rather have the Medal of Honor than be president of the United States." Well, I would rather have the Purple Heart than have 10 dozen Emmys or Oscars. My last thought is, and will always be, no veterans, no democracy, no democracy, no America.